People always tell you that the little things in a marriage don't matter. Looking back, I think the little things tell you everything. My name is Emily, and for 8 years I was married to a man named Ryan. From the outside, we looked like the kind of couple everyone admired. We owned a home in North Carolina. We both had stable jobs. We smiled in family photos, hosted cookouts in the summer, and never argued in public. But behind our front door, there was one sentence I heard almost every week. "You're just being emotional." If I asked why he came home hours late without calling, I was emotional. If I mentioned that he forgot another anniversary, I was emotional. If I told him I felt lonely sitting across from him every night while he scrolled through his phone, I was emotional. At first, I believed him. I started wondering if I really was too sensitive. Maybe other wives didn't mind being ignored. Maybe I expected too much. So, I became quieter. I stopped bringing up the things that hurt me because every conversation ended the same way. Ryan would sigh, shake his head, and say, "Emily, everything doesn't have to become a big deal." After a while, I wasn't trying to win arguments anymore. I was simply trying not to feel invisible. The hardest part wasn't what he said. It was that I slowly stopped trusting my own feelings. Then something happened that changed everything. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning the kitchen while Ryan was outside mowing the lawn. His phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I never touched it. But the screen lit up with a calendar reminder. Dinner with Mark, celebrate new partnership. That caught my attention. Ryan had recently started a small business with his friend Mark, but he hadn't mentioned anything about a partnership. When he came inside, I casually asked how the business was going. He looked surprised. "It's fine. I saw your reminder." His face changed immediately. "Why were you looking at my phone?" "It was on the counter." He laughed. "There you go again. Looking for problems." "I wasn't looking for problems. You always make everything emotional." I apologized. Again, that night I couldn't sleep, not because of the business. Because I realized something. I apologized every time we disagreed, even when I hadn't done anything wrong. The next week, I started writing things down. Not because I planned to leave, because I needed to know whether I was imagining everything. I bought a small notebook and kept it in my desk drawer at work. Every time Ryan dismissed me, interrupted me, or broke a promise, I wrote down the date and exactly what happened. No opinions, just facts. Within 2 months, I had filled half the notebook. Seeing everything in one place was shocking. I wasn't imagining the pattern. I had simply become used to it. One evening, I asked if we could spend one weekend together without work or phones. He barely looked up. "You always need attention. I just miss you." He smiled without warmth. "Emily, you're being emotional again." For the first time, I didn't argue. I simply nodded. That silence surprised him more than any fight ever had. A few days later, I scheduled my first appointment with a therapist. I didn't tell Ryan. I wanted one place where my feelings weren't treated like evidence against me. After listening to me for nearly an hour, my therapist asked one simple question. "When was the last time your husband made you feel emotionally safe?" I couldn't answer, not because I forgot, because I couldn't remember a single time. That answer stayed with me for weeks. Then, one Friday afternoon, everything changed. While organizing paperwork for our taxes, I found an envelope hidden inside Ryan's office drawer. I wasn't searching for secrets. I was looking for last year's insurance documents. Instead, I found something that made my hands freeze. It wasn't another bank statement. It wasn't another business contract. It was paperwork with a lawyer's name across the top. and Ryan had already been planning something without telling me. I stared at the envelope for several seconds before opening it. Inside were documents from a family law attorney. They weren't signed yet, but they were detailed. Pages about assets, debts, and property were neatly organized. My heart sank as I realized Ryan had been gathering information for months. He hadn't mentioned counseling. He hadn't suggested working on our marriage. Instead, he had quietly been preparing for the possibility of ending it. For a moment, I felt embarrassed. I had spent so much energy wondering if I was too emotional, while he had been making life-changing decisions without me. That evening, I didn't confront him. I made dinner. We ate in silence. When he asked if everything was okay, I simply smiled and said, "I'm fine." For the first time, those words weren't meant to protect him. They were protecting me while I figured out my next step. The following Monday, I scheduled a consultation with my own family law attorney. I brought copies of our financial records, my notebook, and every document I could legally gather. The attorney listened carefully. When I finished, she looked at me kindly and said, "You're not here because you're emotional. You're here because you finally started paying attention." I almost cried. Not because I was afraid, because someone believed me without asking me to prove my feelings. Over the next several weeks, I quietly prepared. I opened a bank account in my own name. I reviewed my finances. I leaned on trusted friends instead of hiding what I was going through. I stopped trying to convince Ryan that my feelings mattered. I simply accepted that he had already made his choices. A month later, he came home unusually serious. "We need to talk." I nodded. He placed divorce papers on the kitchen table. "I think this is for the best." Then he looked at me, almost expecting tears or an argument. Instead, I calmly reached into my bag. "I agree." I placed my own signed response from my attorney beside his papers. His confident expression disappeared. "You already have a lawyer?" "Yes. You've been planning this?" I met his eyes and answered softly. "No, I've been preparing to respect myself." For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. The divorce wasn't easy, but it was respectful. There were negotiations, paperwork, and difficult conversations. Yet every decision I made came from a place of clarity instead of fear. Months later, I moved into a small townhouse that felt peaceful the moment I unlocked the door. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, no wondering whether my feelings would be dismissed. One evening, I sat on my back porch with a cup of tea and thought about the woman I had been at the beginning of my marriage. She wasn't weak. She was simply trying too hard to be understood by someone who had stopped listening. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't how to survive divorce. It was that dignity begins the moment you stop apologizing for having emotions. Being emotional never made me the problem. Ignoring my own voice did. Today, when someone tells me I'm too emotional, I smile. Because I know that healthy relationships don't require you to shrink your feelings. They make room for them. And that quiet confidence has become the strongest part of who I am. If this story touched you, please comment and subscribe. I have one question for you. Have you ever apologized for your feelings just to keep the peace? Let me know your answer below.